I remember the early days of VAR. I remember the time before VAR. And I remember on Match of the Day, for example, watching Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer and Jermaine Genius and many other presenters of that show would sort of highlight and detail the issues and the wrong decisions that referees had made throughout several matches in the years leading up to VAR. And for whatever reason, looking back on it now, I kind of, in hindsight, can see that maybe there was kind of an agenda against sort of refereeing decisions since they were so highlighted and focused in on. So much attention was given to it. It was headline news. It was all over Match of the Day. It would be on the sort of analysis of the live games. And as I say, in hindsight, it seems that there was a serious agenda to try to delegitimize referees in this country and in other countries as well. But with particular emphasis on the Premier League. And I kind of look back on that now, and there was no kind of significantly different or significantly increased amount of poor refereeing decisions in that period before VAR was reduced and sort of the 10 years previous to that. And obviously, we had issues of like the game was probably a bit faster than it was than the previous periods. But the reality was that the referee, the linesman, the fourth official were more than sufficient to uphold the game. It was more than sufficient to catch the more important issues in the game, catch the more important decisions in the game, and maybe over the course of a season, one or two decisions would slip by, let's say, per week. And that was really it. It wasn't like one every game. It's like one or two every week. And over the course of the season, it was true that it did kind of equalize. If you were at the misfortune of a bad decision this week, then we would get sort of 2 or 3 months down the line and you would be at fortune of a bad decision. And so you would always end up by the end of the season sort of 1 for 1 or 2 for 2 or 3 for 3, or if you were very lucky, 4 for 4. These things would sort of equalize over the course of the season. And the reality is that it wouldn't massively negatively affect your finishing place in the league. And then there was this massive highlighting of poor refereeing decisions by the media, by the news, by newspapers, certain programming related to football. And there was a conversation around bringing in a VAR system because by this time, sort of rugby had implemented it and snooker had been using it for a very long time. Tennis used it. There were sports in America that used it. And it seemed like a pretty good idea. The argument obviously was that it would allow us to reduce the refereeing mistakes and we could have a much more consistent game. But there were arguments against it. And at the time, it seemed that those arguments were being presented fairly in a balanced perspective with regard to, well, if we implemented this, like we appreciate having a fast game in football and VAR would create stoppages where there's not naturally a stoppage, or it would increase the time of stoppages, and that would negatively affect the game. It would take the kind of ebb and flow out of the game of football. So we don't really want that as it's sort of presently available. Because obviously with a game like tennis, you have multiple stoppages in just in a game of tennis, never mind in a set of tennis. And so it's quite viable to then have a VAR system. especially because, the rules of tennis, what could be considered a mistake by a referee, it's very limited. It's in or it's out. And typically that's the only thing that they would use a VAR system for anyway. There's no VAR for did it hit the net or not. It's quite clear when it hits the net. The only reason to use that would be in or out for tennis. For snooker, it's where am I going to replace the ball when a foul's called and the ball needs to be returned to its original spot. And typically it would take a referee several minutes to kind of try to find that spot based off of memory alone anyway. So let's implement VAR to make it easier for them. And rugby, there's not many rules in rugby that you could use a VAR system for. And so if we implement a VAR system when there's a natural stop in the game, it's only going to be sort of 1 or 2 times per game. And the original argument for VAR in football was that it would only be used for certain instances in a game. For example, a red card decision, or a potential offside for a goal, or a potential foul leading up to a goal, or a penalty situation. And the argument as well was that, but don't worry about it. We're not going to interfere in play all the time. It will only be when there's a clear and obvious mistake. So that was when it was implemented. But as I said, the arguments leading up to it was, well, we didn't really want to slow down the game, so we'll sort of leave it for a bit. And then what happened was that as time went by, the highlighting of referees' mistakes just became more and more intense and more frequent, such that it was almost like they were trying to lead us to the point where we were begging for a VAR. And sort of pundits who had made arguments against VAR previous to this, based on it would really slow the game down, they started to sort of make arguments in favour of VAR, saying, well, look, the referees are so inconsistent at this point that we need to implement this system to make it consistent. And they got fans on side, such that when VAR had a really good, they first implemented it for an international tournament. When they implemented that, and it went quite well, the fans started begging for it. We need this in the Premier League. We need this. And so they announced that they would implement it in the Premier League and other club leagues and competitions. And people were really happy to have it. And then what happened was that the first season that it was introduced, it became quite clear, actually, that the issue with the referees' inconsistent decision-making was not that the referees didn't see certain things, it was that the rules were bad. And so when they had the use of VAR to make clear decisions with the opportunity to see replays from different angles in slow motion, sped up, normal speed, whatever you like, and the referees continued to make poor decisions, it could only lead me to 2 conclusions. It was either that the referees were awful and didn't understand the game of football and the rules thereof, or the rules thereof themselves were awful, and that there had been changes to rules in football that we weren't aware of that were occurring behind the scenes that made football no longer resemble the sport that we thought that we were watching. Because all of a sudden, when referees had all of the opportunity to uphold all of the rules of the sport, without being able to miss things, without being able to forget them because they had somebody in their ear saying, oh, remember this rule, or, oh, don't forget about this section of this rule, section C of rule 24A or whatever it might be, then all of a sudden what it meant was that the rules, even the minor rules, were clamped down on with the use of VAR and the abilities that that gives referees to uphold those rules. So the conclusion that I've come to since then is that the rules have been changed behind our backs, away from us, without us realizing, without them sort of being announced to the world. The rules have been changed such that the game no longer resembles the game that I grew up with, the game that I fell in love with. Between the years of sort of 1997 and 2003, when I was becoming an adolescent boy and out there playing the game for myself and watching my heroes like Thierry Henry and Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo a bit later on, and Dennis Bergkamp and David Beckham, these players playing that game that I fell in love with, it became very clear to me, away from the changes, the tactical changes, sort of people altering the game for themselves with regards to management and tactics, strategy, a Jose Mourinho sort of character coming in, Arsene Wenger altering the way that the game was played. Away from that, the game was no longer that there are rules in the game of football which no longer make that game football as we know it, football that we grew up with and fell in love with and understood and admired the beauty of the game, whether it be individual beauty, Ronaldinho going on a mad dribble, pulling out skills that we'd just never seen before, that we would go out onto our local field and try to replicate, or a Jose Mourinho introducing a Makelele type player to create a brand new way of playing a 4-3-3, utilising Damien Duff and an Arjen Robben on the wings and blitzing teams with pace and being unbelievably tough defensively. That admiration, that football that we fell in love with is gone because the rules have been changed and because VAR is now in place to allow referees to uphold every single minor rule with somebody in their ear reminding them of every single minor rule that's been introduced behind our backs. And that is why I fucking hate VAR and referees. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Don't forget to comment down below what you think about VAR, rule changes and current football. Don't forget to comment below and have a great day.